Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of webinar from Promises together with Singapore Press Holdings. For today's first webinar, we're going to talk about after the circuit breaker, adjusting to the new normal. So this is a time when we return back to work or moving from the circuit breaker to phase one. So I'm quite certain there'll be some transition. So myself, I'm Joachim Lee, and together with me is my colleague Sulin. So we will be sharing, and what will be quite exciting is when you'll be able to ask us questions anonymously using the Q&A button. So please do ask your questions. But before we begin, we have a poll, just a 3-question poll. Can you just go in and just answer? So with that, we're going to streamline and focus on how we can adjust it for you. So thank you, and please do that now. We'll give about 2 minutes to complete the poll for those who need time to just reflect on the questions.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Sulin. Thanks for doing the poll. We have seen the poll results, and I believe you will also have seen the results. Okay, we're just because Joachim is handling my slides, so we're just trying to adjust to this technical glitch for a while. Just give us a moment. And then the next slide. No, not yet. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. All right, we got it back up again. Right, so what happens now is that it's a global phenomenon that most people are feeling some sense of anxiety and stress. especially as countries are actually slowly moving out of lockdown, and for us as we ease out of the circuit breaker and start returning to work. So these feelings are actually valid because there's still a lot of uncertainty and there's just so many changes to adapt to. And you may have wondered, why you are feeling this way and whether actually are these feelings normal. So in modern society, numerous risks, right, like terrorism, protests and riots, which is what's happening right now, and pandemic outbreaks, they're always lurking around every corner. And whenever people witness an emergency situation or see someone getting harmed, our brains are somewhat actually hardwired to react in a certain way. So if I was to use the hand model of the brain, okay, so this is actually like the amygdala. Now this part here is controls the emotions and memories in our brain. Okay, so our brain can actually be, we break it into two parts. There is the upstairs brain and then there is the downstairs brain. So in the downstairs brain, it consists of the amygdala, right, which controls the memories and our emotions. And this part here, where the brainstem is actually the part that actually regulates, it's called the autonomic nervous system, which regulates the fight, flight, or rather it's the survival instincts. Okay, the upstairs brain is actually the neocortex region. It is the smarter part of ourselves. Okay, some people call it the God brain, and this part here actually regulates how we think. It rationalizes, it analyzes people's behavior, our own behavior, right? And it's where all the thought processes come into play. So usually what happens is that, when we are faced with a situation, the upstairs brain and the lowest and the downstairs brain work together and they're being activated at the same time, right? But what happens is that in times of stress and uncertainty, this thinking part of our brain, and this is a term that actually Dr. Dan Siegel coins it as flipping the lid. Right, so when there is in times of stress and uncertainty, what happens is that the amygdala and the downstairs part of the brain becomes it becomes very activated, okay, and then the neocortex actually flips over. Okay, it gets hijacked by all our emotions and everything that is happening for us. Our fight and flight survival instincts all kick in. Now, this survival mode or the fight or flight response is a very common response to stress. It is actually driven by the need for self-preservation, protection, and safety. Okay, it actually helps us to survive. And these primal instincts actually date back to prehistoric times, as long as 200,000 years ago when it was caveman era. And this is a very common story that's being told because as cavemen, when you see danger or when they saw danger, for example, when they see something slithering in the grass, the first thing that they're going to do is to jump, right? Later, then your brain kicks in to say, oh, I think that was a snake. Or another modern day example could be that, when we are touching or when our hand accidentally touches something hot, but before our brain registers that this is something hot, immediately we would retract our hand. And this is the part of the brain that actually keeps us safe, right, from threats. The problem is that a lot of times the downstairs brain is not like the upstairs brain. Upstairs brain, right, is able to analyze and know that this is a threat that is real or is it perceived. Unfortunately, the downstairs brain, which usually hijacks us in times of uncertainty and stress, does not have a timestamp to it, and it does not know whether this threat is real or perceived. If you can recall, right, at the start of the circuit breaker, or just before we went to circuit breaker, there was a lot of people were starting to panic buy, right, like toilet paper and things like that. Well, what happens is that our stress response actually kicked in. Before we were rationalizing why people are buying toilet paper, the first thing that happens is that people are buying, just buy first, right? And that is actually our survival skills kicking in. Okay, so a lot of times what happens is that we end up hyper-focusing on the virus. And these are some of the common work-related factors that added to the stress during the pandemic when work from home first started. Even though it was difficult, we somehow managed to pull through. And that is our natural ability to be resilient. We slowly became used to our new lives in lockdown and our anxiety began to subside. There's a lot of things that we had to learn, right? We learned how to take care of our own personal and family needs while working from home. We learned how to actually set boundaries for ourselves, make our home appropriately set up for work meetings. And there's so much things that we had to adapt to. For some of us, we never used Zoom before, we had to learn how to use Zoom, right? So there were a lot of things that we all had to deal with. And I also do know for parents also, it's also dealing with, helping your child, assisting them with home-based learning. There was just so much things that was happening. And now, as we return to work, well, basically, even before returning to work, right, I was mentioning about how much things we need to cope. We have to cope with high levels of uncertainty about your personal, professional, and financial future. And right now, as organizations are phasing workers back into the office, this is again going to create a new set of uncertainties, right, about personal safety and how to adapt to new routines. So earlier on, when we saw the poll results, I mean, these were some valid concerns that you raised, right, about, going back to the office, having to have that physical distancing. So for some employees, returning to the office may be a welcome opportunity, right? They may be feeling very happy and relieved. Perhaps at home there was no aircon and it has been so hot the past few days, right? So maybe coming back to the office, finally, okay, there's aircon. You are again back into your familiar environment of your workstation. Again, you get to see some of your colleagues, perhaps. Okay, for some of you, you may get to see your colleagues. There is definitely less isolation as compared to working from home, which you were, we all had to cope with. And however, for others, right, they may be feeling stress and also worry because perhaps, it took a lot of people time to adjust to all these things. And finally, when we are able to work out a routine to work from home, to manage our what's happening with our family, to manage home-based learning for the kids. For some, they're also caring for the elderly, right? So for caregivers who are returning to work, and also for other people who may have concerns about their health, right now leaving home to return to office is going to increase stress and worry again. So, reports are beginning to surface about how people's mental health is again being affected. Many people are worrying about whether it's safe to go back to work, whether they are able to send their children back to school. I did attend some of the Facebook Live sessions that MOE held. So there was one session that MOE held just when home-based learning was going to kick in. And then another session recently when they announced that children are going to be phased back to school on alternate week of home-based learning. And there was just so many comments from parents, hundreds and hundreds of comments, and many people were reacting differently. Many of whom were actually acting angrily. Actually, there were a lot of angry comments. And you know what? A lot of this is because it's mainly related to uncertainty. Nobody knows how it will be like when all the children start going back to school, right? What we can do right now is only manage what we can control. So we do not know what the future will hold, and all these worries can sometimes keep us up at night. It can trigger excessive and uncontrollable worrying, and it can also lead to physical symptoms such as shortness of breath, heart palpitations. And what happens is that when we get so worried, it's also going to take a physiological toll on our physical body. That will also mean, right, that our immune system may be affected, and this will make us actually more susceptible to the disease and to falling sick. So for people with a pre-existing anxiety disorder or depression, the virus is actually a recipe for disaster. We have to, for them, they have to go back out to the society, and this may actually trigger past conditions, right, such as health anxiety. And you may have also read in the papers or even in the media that there are people with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, okay? And these are definitely real struggles for them right now. On one hand, we're advised to wash our hands frequently and keep our distance from others. But then again, there's also a tipping point, right? At what stage are we actually keeping safe behaviors? And at what stage does it actually tip the line and it morphs into a mental disorder? So sometimes we think that worrying serves as a useful purpose, making us vigilant and prepared. And we believe that it can also help us arrive at a good solution, right? By being proactive, thinking about the situation ahead. Problem is that worrying, for even a short amount of time, predisposes us to even more worrying. And before we know it, we are stuck in this vicious cycle that we find ourselves stuck in. So it is actually a myth that worrying helps us arrive at a better solution. It actually only makes us feel anxious and stressed, especially if the worrying becomes chronic. So, well, on one hand, right now, we may be more aware that worrying is not helping us. Okay, so what's going to happen next is that there is a need for us to then be able to let go of these anxious thoughts and focus on the present moment. Focus on what is it that is within our control and then make the changes from there. All right, and I think that's all for my segment for now. I'm going to hand it back over to Joachim, and maybe after he's done with that, then we'll take in more of the question and answers. All right, over to you, Joachim.
Thank you, Sulin. So my segment, let me just start by talking about what it means to be human. And as a human being, we all know that there are some core human needs that no matter what status we are, rich, poor, powerful, grounded, there are core human needs that we are all needing to feel alive. And the first need is that we all need a sense of certainty. And one of the things we experienced during the circuit breaker was all of a sudden our normalcy, our ability to just function was halted. And from going and sharing seats or having a distance in our restaurants, to all of a sudden we can't even go. So that created some felt sense of uncertainty. And as human beings, we all need that. Without a sense of certainty or a routine, our life becomes haywire. And now that we're moving back into phase one, after circuit breaker, we are adjusting again now to a new normal. And new normal means adjusting to what's going to happen at work or when the children go to school, getting back to a new normalcy. It's a sense of certainty that we know that all life. For example, when we wake up morning, we know that the sun will rise and our country is still not in war. So that gives us a sense of stability. So we all need a certain sense of certainty. And interestingly, as human beings, we also need a certain level of variety. Imagine day in, day out, we just eat, let's say, chicken rice for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. All the meals, after a while, we will just be bored with it. So as human beings, there is a need for also variety. And now that we're adjusting to this new normalcy, it's a matter of what is the new certain routine we have at work or at home, and also what kind of a variety that can we have to ensure that our core human needs are met. And that will be very different for everyone. And that's also how then we create together in your workplace at home to have a certainty and a variety. But interestingly, the third thing is that we all need connection. And one of the things I'm quite certain we all experience is when the circuit breaker came into force and we had to work from home, all of a sudden we can't even socialize with our friends. There was a sense of disconnectedness. We felt that all of a sudden we felt uneasy, like, is this what it means to be human, that we can't even socialize? And you saw how some of us, not us, but some people actually broke the circuit breaker and violated it, and then they got into trouble. And this was how it's so ingrained in us that we need a sense of connection. And when we return to work now, it's also then having that connection with our colleagues, and how do they look like? So these three core human needs, certainty, variety, and connection, is what makes us who we are. So having that in mind, so then how do we adjust to a new normal workplace? It's going to take time. So the first thing we need to know is that it takes time, because it took us some time to adjust to the circuit breaker. And after some time now, we're adjusting to a new phase one. So to adjust to a new normal in a workplace, a few criteria that has to be met. And it's listed there, a mindset change, even then dealing with the new environmental changes, and the way we communicate. And that's a key thing. As we return to work, communication is crucial. How we then request, if we are introverts and we do not communicate with our supervisor or even with our peers, we need to figure out how we can communicate using probably WhatsApp, whatever, because that is what defines us as a human being. And when we return to work, it's so important because we need to be heard, we need to connect. Then the poll say in terms of 43% was concerned about the social distancing, wearing masks. How then do we adjust to that? Wearing a mask at all times at work is going to be, it's time to adjust again, taking breaks, and then our personal protective kit and behaviors. So let's go to detail those pointers one by one. So when I talk about mindset change, again, I mentioned it takes time to adjust. So like what Sulin shared that we have the primitive brain and the more modern brain. Many times, because the primitive brain is wired to fight or flight to protect us. And once we just return to a new work setting, a new normal, the amygdala is still firing the fight or flight because it's still not familiar to us. We still need to create what is a new certainty for us. So the key is that give yourself time to adjust. That is so crucial. I remember just when we went to phase 2, my first day when I took the train to work, I was so shocked. I didn't expect all of a sudden the stickers to separate one seat from another. The gap was removed and there's no more where you should be, your designated place to stand. It was all removed. All of a sudden, we were all mingling together again. We were like sitting side by side or we're standing so close. And my mind was like, what? I wasn't prepared for this. My mind was still the circuit breaker where there was a gap. And all of a sudden, I told myself, okay, I know I'm reacting. I know my amygdala is firing the fight or flight. And I need to tell myself, just breathe and just be present. And today is day 3 of the phase 1. And I went to train today. All of a sudden, all right, okay, we all seated together. And it was quite crowded this morning. So I was standing, people were quite close to me. And I adjusted to that. And so again, allow yourself time to adjust to a new work setting, a new normal. And as human beings, because of the need for normalcy, consistency, variety, there is a tendency to compare with the previous normal. No, in the past was this, during circuit breaker, we're doing this, now with this. So we will tend to compare. So what's happening here is the mind is figuring out what is the new certainty now, new normal now. So comparing is going to happen. So in other words, is give yourself the time to compare and give yourself the permission not to take it too seriously for the time being. Until it settles down, then you know, okay, this is how it was. And now because of phase 1, this is how we're going to adapt to it. And in some sense, this is a requirement that we all have to adjust to ensure that none of us are affected with another round of COVID-19. So again, with this mindset change, there is a tendency for our thinking to become, we start to criticize, I don't know, I'm doing this, why aren't you doing that? I'm keeping my distance, why aren't you? I'm wearing my mask, why aren't you? Or we become critical of ourselves. So in this adjustment, if you find yourself comparing yourself with others or being hard on yourself, give yourself space to acknowledge I'm doing this, but don't take it personal. Don't take it too seriously for the time being, because again, the mindset change takes time. And however, if this continues after more than 7 days, I would suggest talk to someone to figure out, am I having undue stress and needs to be talked with. There is also that tendency that I may not be performing up to my expectations. During the circuit breaker, when I returned to work, I had this feeling too, like I'm not performing because with the circuit breaker, the ability to see my clients face to face were limited to Zoom. And because of Zoom, it took time for my clients to also adjust to, okay, I'll see you in Zoom, not face to face. And because I wasn't seeing my regular caseload as frequent as the past, I started to ask myself, am I performing? Am I doing what I'm meant to do? So again, this is how the mind works. You start comparing yourself that you're not performing. Again, give yourself permission to have those thoughts, yet don't take it too personal, too serious. Or again, the next thought we may have is that you begin to figure out that this new normal, this new practice is not good enough. No, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. No, this is not stringent enough or too stringent. These are how the mind play in us because we're looking for a certain level of certainty and a certain level of variety. So again, give yourself permission. So in other words, to have the mindset change, give yourself time to adjust. It takes time. It's not just give yourself time. Be gentle with yourself and others because others will also be finding ways to adjust. And so our pacing may be different from others. We may be fast, others will be slow to adjust. So do not compare and be gentle with others and ourselves. And more importantly, breathing. Breathing is the first thing we had when we were born or when we were conceived, and the last thing we have. So breathe. It's the breathing, the deep breathing that actually calms the amygdala, the primitive brain, or the lower brain that Sulin talks about. By doing that, the fight or flight response is more regulated and we can then think logically. So that's where mindset change. So then, environment, in terms of the environmental changes, the key point is that it's normal to feel frustrated, anxious, or restricted. I know when we move into phase one, the first reaction I had is, what? Even to enter, to go out, to enter, go out, I had to scan the contact tracing so many times. And I found myself, I don't want to enter here now. Even to enter to Bread Talk just to buy my bread, I have to scan inside. It's like, makes no sense. Or even just off the counter to pay for it, I don't enter, I need to scan. So I was feeling that frustration myself. I felt I was restricted. So as we move towards this environment changes, notice the frustration, anxiety, restriction may affect us. Again, normalize it because we are all adjusting to a new normal. Of course, then the new normal will change when we move to phase two. But for phase one now, this is how the new normal will look like. The key is this. In this effort of us to adjust to this new environment, again, the key to tell us that there is a need for all of us intrinsically to feel safe and secure. And the distancing that we're practicing in the workplaces is one of the key things that we have to comply with regulation because we want to feel safe and secure. And if we find our colleagues not doing it, again, tendency to react, compare, or to criticize or to judge or frustrate, feel frustration or feel restricted will come in. Adjust to that. Give yourself time. So giving yourself time to adjust. And the third thing is that because of the environment changes, you notice that our workstations that we have, we'll be probably spending more time sanitizing it, or when we touch some printer, some equipment that's shared, we will need to do more of those sanitizing as part of a new practices that we need to do in order to create an environment that is safe. And again, now we notice that taking MC is acceptable if you're not feeling well. So when we're ill, we avoid returning to work. So these are the changes that we have to face. For some of us who like to just work, these are times when we need to slow down because time has to spend adjusting to the environment, adjusting to how we make sure that our environment is safe, sanitized, and also being aware of ourselves. If we are feeling a bit unwell, under the weather, it's then time to say, okay, I need to just work from home or isolate myself if I'm already at the office. So again, it's a lot of changes we're making, and this will be the new normal for the time being. So if you feel frustrated, anxious, restricted, for me it was a fact I felt so restricted going from one place to another. Those are normal feelings, and those are times we tell ourselves we are adjusting to a new normal. So I mentioned earlier, communication, because of phase one now that we're adjusting to a new normal, communication is critical. And we talk about even the core human needs, certainty, variety, connection. We all need connection as human beings. We are wired to connect with one another. No matter how introverted we are wired to connect. So when we return now to our workplace, this is one thing we need to mindfully and actively do. So in other words, we need to keep the channel of communication open. When we face challenges at home, with caregiving, with children, don't keep to yourself, share with your supervisor, your colleagues, so they understand your difficulties. Because when they understand, what's happening is that then you realize, okay, my colleagues understand, my supervisor understands. Back your mind is, I'm not performing at work. Can be SUH, can be then acknowledged, validated, and so you know that I'm not alone. And when your colleagues share, you notice similarities. So even your challenges at work, with this new environment, the way we work will change. The distancing, the commuting, even the way we used to socialize by eating together, we can't have that anymore. So literally eating in our workstation or eating in one corner. So we need to find ways we can communicate. We need to connect. So while we maintain that appropriate social distancing, connect with your colleagues, share with your supervisor, share with your manager, or just keeping a text, oh, I'm at work today, this is what I'm going to do. At least they know, if you have this sense that I may not be, or my boss may think I'm not performing, I'm not doing my work, just share that. It's good then be accountable and we have that connection. So communication is key in this new normal. In the past, we can just do work and also I say, oh, he or she is here, we're doing our work. And now because of distancing and because of probably split teams, half in office, half at home, then we rotate. We may not know and we think, oh, my boss doesn't know, my spouse doesn't know I'm working. So by that sharing what you're doing today or what's happening today in your life, in your work, helps with that core human need, the connection, and also helps us to adjust to a new normal in the workplace. The third thing in communication is be aware of your emotions. There are times we will feel anxious, frustrated, or even angry. I feel so restricted. I feel, why is this necessary? Why must we do that? So key is, if you're affected or you feel that you are agitated or you need to vent it out, text your colleague, connect to share. And because of social distancing, if you see your colleague at work and there's a time, of course, maintain distance, just share, I'm feeling frustrated today, I'm feeling so restricted, I can't even eat with my friends, my colleagues, I can't even go and do this now, or my movement in office is restricted to this area. Share that because you don't want to bottle that down. We do know that stress is because of our emotional or mental ability to manage situations. And if we keep bottling inside, what's going to happen is going to affect our health, or what Sulin shared earlier. There will be even develop mental health challenges, or to the point we can't perform. I know once when I was going through a lot of stress, my younger days, I did not share. To a point I went to work, my brain just froze. I went to office and I just couldn't function. I knew I was at work. I knew I had to do something, but I just couldn't think. So the key is to share, communicate. I will suggest at this moment, because of the new normal, start a back to work e-buddy system where we can be accountable to each other. Oh, I'm doing this today. Oh, how are you today? At least when we have that, there is again the key critical understanding that we are connecting with each other. The connection, if I can't stress it over and over again, is besides the certainty and variety, the connection with each other will help us through tremendously as we move towards the new normal, as we enter the new normal, the way of working. And the distancing, the social distancing, as we all know from what the ministers of government said, is going to be with us until COVID-19 literally disappears or we find a vaccine to manage it. So to manage ourselves and to make sure our human needs are met, connect, start your own e-buddy system. So again, This is one of the things we all know, the new normal, workplace distancing, more space between colleagues. Even now in our webinar, there's a distance between myself and my colleagues, and we can't even have the normal time we meet for meals or we meet chat. There has to be a distance, and this is how the new normal is going to be. So in other words, this rather than fight it, let's tell ourselves this is a new normal. That there's going to be a space between me and a colleague, or there'll be even less people in the workplace now. And maybe my best colleague the most is in a different team, so I won't see him or her frequently. This is how it's going to be. So in other words, accept it, but create the e-buddy system. And one of the things we know now with new normals is to minimize any long group meetings, and we're told to have more conferencing, tele meetings, like this webinar now, a new normal for all of us. Even for me now, I see a lot of my clients, a lot is done via Zoom. So it's again adjusting to the new normal. I guess this is going to be a favorite for all of us. Because of this new normal, the brain, our brain, like what Sudhi has mentioned, is still adjusting to a point where the fight-flight response in our amygdala will take time for it to settle down. To demonstrate, that's to show in any one moment, this is how our amygdala is functioning. It's this way because our amygdala's main function is to keep us safe. Is to be able to respond whenever something happens. Like if someone charges a room now with a knife, our amygdala will, okay, we need to react, respond. However, because of a new normal, some of our amygdala could be functioning this way. Well, this normal, this is what's happening. So one way to regulate it is the breathing, because the breathing that tells the brain is safe. We are adjusting to a new normal. But one of the key ways of even now as we move towards a new normal, and when we work, we're so engrossed, we don't have time to even connect, to see that person, oh, I can see my colleague there, is to literally schedule short breaks in between our work. Need not be 10, 15, 20 minutes, just even a short 2-3 minute break, just to reorient ourselves to this new normal and to anchor ourselves back. Okay, this is how it is going to be. By doing that, what's happening is we are working, aligning ourselves with maybe like, okay, this is how it's going to be. So the brain normalizes, this is the new normal now, and there's no need to react. The more we feel the tension, the stress, or the frustration, my suggestion for the time being is to have more short, regular breaks, just to manage to adjust. And so by doing that, we're allowing our body and our mind to work together. The last thing we want is our mind is running one way, our body is responding another way. So that's when easily develop psychosomatic symptoms, we fall sick, our immune system drops. And by doing that, we actually allow our mind and body to work together in this new normal. Okay, this is then how we maintain our personal protective kit and behaviors. In this new normal now, my suggestion is invest in your own kit. Never before in my life do I carry a hand sanitizer with me. But ever since COVID-19, the circuit breaker, hand sanitizer is always with me. So I have it with me all the time. I always have a spare mask with me. And what this means is that this is how the new normal is going to be, because we want to ensure that our mind and body is safe, and by creating that our own sense of safety and security and well-being, our amygdala working together. Part of it is also washing our hands before and after meals. We have known this from young, we were in school, but again now making this a habit. And now the workplace, wearing our mask at all times. It is inconvenient, it's irritating, and for some of us it will be difficult to breathe. But again, this is how the new normal is going to be, wearing the mask. And the third, fourth thing is that regularly sanitize your hands on surface that you touch at work. If there's a shared equipment like printer or whatever, sanitize it. It's not that we're becoming obsessive compulsive, but again, it's how we ensure that we feel safe, that we feel that we are managing ourselves. So I'll suggest having your own personal protective kit and behaviors. So my last slide, I like this from Master Wu Kui from Kung Fu Panda. He says that yesterday is history, tomorrow is mystery, but today is a gift. That's why we call it the present. So what we have now is the present moment where we are adjusting to a new normal in our workplaces, even at homes, even with our family. And look at it from a new lens that it is the present because we have it today and we can create the present the way we want it to be, where we feel safe, secure, and we know that I'm protected, my colleagues are protected, and my family is protected and safe. So my suggestion now, my final point is that as we move towards a new normal, give yourself the time, but be present, in the present, doing what you need to feel safe, to feel secure, and to manage whatever reaction that we have, because a new normal requires a new way of responding. All right, so with that, I'll stop here and I'll see if we have any questions that we can answer. So do send your questions anonymously while we look at it and we can answer it.
Okay, so we do have some questions in the Q&A chat. I'll address the first two questions. Okay, there's one question on how to reduce the social needs in the human and how to reduce the need for normalcy in the human. So thank you very much for asking this question. All right, so, well, you know, actually as human beings, we are actually social creatures by nature. Being social creatures, we do actually crave and we thrive with connections. These are things that make us thrive in uncertain times. It's actually the connections that help us to keep going. It makes us more resilient as well. So for me, I feel that it's not so much about how to reduce the needs in a human being, because these are natural needs for us. So it's not so much about how to reduce it, but perhaps it's more about thinking, how am I being triggered? Where is this sense of, why do I have this need for normalcy? So it's really going back again to having that level of awareness. And it's very good that from the get-go, you're aware that, oh, I feel that I have this need for it. I'm being triggered, right? That's the amygdala and the emotions coming in. So that is when we quickly catch ourselves and we start thinking about where these are coming from and rationalize it, or rather come up with evidence to support why we are feeling this way. And once we are more aware of our feelings, how we are being triggered, then it's really about having that self-compassion, being gentle to ourselves, right? And I feel that, unfortunately, especially in the Asian culture, a lot of times we are very critical on ourselves. We have this very strong inner critic that keeps beating ourselves up, and we're always very driven. We are obviously very efficiency driven, right? And we push ourselves a lot, and we keep thinking, why am I feeling this way? This is not normal, but the problem is that the more we try and push away all these thoughts and emotions, the truth is that feelings are real. They will always be there, and no matter how much we try to repress it, one day it will just explode. So it's really about managing it, regulating ourselves, right? So first being aware, regulating ourselves, and then of course, in regulating ourselves, we have to have that self-compassion and gentleness. It is a new muscle that we need to actually practice, and over time make it into a habit, into how we actually regulate ourselves in compassion. And I think that's a very important value for ourselves to work on, actually. Joachim, do you have anything to add on to that? Okay. Then now there is another question on, okay, so this question is on, I have been complying, I'll just read it out anyway, complying with the required measures, right? For example, wearing a mask, eating alone, checking in and out, using the Safe Entry app, and then sometimes once in a while, and this is a very normal thing, right? When we go out, for example, for myself, I always feel that I'm taking so much pain. Yes, sometimes it is painful, right? For me too. I'm taking so much pain to wear my mask. and to be a responsible citizen. And then the next moment when I'm outside, right, taking all these pains, I see others who are not doing the same thing as me. Of course, sometimes I will also feel, am I in danger? And then I do also feel the urge of wanting to tell them off. Okay? But then, of course, also wondering, I want to tell them off, but sometimes I also don't feel like I have the courage to actually go up to them and tell them off, right? Now, the thing is, how we react to that situation is something that I need to be aware of also, So number one, before I tell them off, where is this urge in me to want to tell them off, right? So one could be, yes, I feel danger for myself, right? That is a threat to me. So number one is going back again to where am I feeling threatened, right? Is this a valid threat, or is it perceived, or is it a real threat? Well, in this pandemic, it sounds like it's going to be a real threat, right? And then thirdly, after that is, how am I going to approach this situation? Is because, how am I going to tell them? Am I going to speak to them nicely and calmly as another citizen to citizen, right? Or am I going to lash out? So it's also very important how we check our own behavior and our emotions. And when we speak to another person, it's how are we going to manage that reaction, right? Because I think the last thing that I will want to do is also, create a scene or create a fight, right? So even when I want to approach that person and speak to that person and share my own views, I probably would have to calm myself down first, right? Regulate my own emotions, regulate my reaction, so that when I speak to that person, it's going to be a very, well, for me, I want it to be a peaceful confrontation. It's okay to confront another person, but it's how we're going to do it, to do it peacefully and to really share my view as a concerned citizen, right? And also at the same time helping him and educating that person on why there is a need for all these safety measures being put in place. And hopefully, when I am actually having that calm conversations with the other person will also be able to calmly receive what I'm saying, right? Because if I were to react in a very angry manner, can you imagine that the first thing that person is going to feel, again, for that person, the amygdala is going to kick in too, right? Yeah. So we don't want that to happen. It's just going to be amygdala versus another amygdala. And okay, I'm just using this, like, I know I'm throwing out all these brain terms, but basically what I'm trying to say is that when a person is activated, right, and just speaking to another person who's activated, there's probably going to be a lot of loss in communication. It's not going to be a clear bridge in communication anymore, right? So it has to be coming from a clear perspective, a calm perspective, speaking to another person calmly. Joaquin, do you have anything to add for that?
Just to add to that, it's a matter of how we want to approach this. We can just say, again, knowing that we feel we are threatened or we feel unsafe is one. But once we understand that, so when we go and approach the person, we are going not as a position of being a vigilante or trying to correct, or just making a suggestion. Can you put it on, or can you do this? Is because of the requirements. So we can say it in a way that does not provoke a reaction, but just a reminder. Just this morning when I left the house, I saw people looking at me and keep pointing my face. I realized, oh, I forgot to wear my mask. So I was okay, thank you. So they did came and say, where's your mask? Oh, this I forgot about it. And that was a good reminder. So again, how we come across and how we make that request plays a lot into how the person reacts. So we don't have to correct, we can just make a suggestion and just remind them this is as long while we're complying with what's required by regulation, without going to a long lecture. We just say, okay, put it on because it's just what we need to do now is the new normal. Good enough. And again, we do not want to trigger because we do not know where the person is coming from. So it may have an adverse effect and they may react. So what Sudesh mentioned, just bring it across as a gentle way will help. Okay, and the other question I might briefly is on the relationship. Just let you know that this is one of a series of webinars we're going to have with SPH, and one of the topics actually on relationships. So we covered that in more detail at that time. But basically now, in terms of how to deal with relationship strain, the first thing is ask yourself this: do I value this relationship? And if I do, then next question is, how can I, because now I can't see a person face to face, am I willing, am I able to then take the next step by having connecting using more devices, Zoom, FaceTime, or WhatsApp video chat. So that allows us to then to see if the connection is still valuable, to we still value that connection, that relationship, rather than remaining silent. In this juncture, can I just add that if a relationship is strained, do not text, because by just texting words, we miss the nuances of how a person's reaction, or the words may not come out well. So have the facial, the face, and we communicate, hey, this is really a strain. Can we talk about this more? Where are we going towards? It will help a long way. All right. Hopefully that can answer just briefly. The next question. So this, can you just read?
I'm just going back up again because I realized there's one more question that I haven't addressed yet. It's about entering the lift at the office. And what happens is that I use my bare fingers. So this question says, I use my bare fingers to press the lift button, but the other person in the lift used a tissue paper. I felt very stupid, as if I was not doing the correct thing, and that that other guy in the lift seems to be more right than me. So should I tell him off and let him know that he is perhaps too paranoid? But what happens if he retaliates and scolds me? So it's actually interesting how we are, again, very quick to criticize ourselves, right? So it's very interesting how this question, how it's being worded also, like, I feel very stupid. And that's something that unfortunately a lot of us naturally do to ourselves. We think that somebody is more right or less right than me, right? And there is this judgment that we place on ourselves and our own feelings. So then again, we also have to realize that everyone has their own way of adjusting to this new normal. Different people at different places in terms of emotionally, right? Internally, they're at a different place. We also have to understand that people do take time. They're at their own level. People take their own, they have their own level of readiness and comfort, that sense of security that we're all at different levels of. So one thing is, earlier on I mentioned about how we need to be self-compassionate towards ourselves also, and not be so quick to judge ourselves as to whether that we are very stupid and things like that. One is self-compassion. The other thing also is about compassion for others. So it's also very important, especially during this time of uncertainty, right? When we are seeing a lot of what we may easily coin as to be weird behavior or paranoid behavior from others. I think this, although it's very easy for us to judge, actually a lot of times how we judge others is a mirror of how we judge ourselves, So I really feel that this muscle of having to practice compassion for ourselves and others is something that we have to start building up. And this is a very good time for us also to start practicing and adopting that level of empathy for ourselves and for others. So thank you for that question.
There's a question here on, as a team leader, how can I offer support to my team during this time? Beautiful question, and right appropriate time to ask a question. So as a team leader, what is needed now is basically, as a team leader, you need to take the lead. And you can take the lead by literally creating, probably asking your team what kind of support they need now, what kind of what can you help them? So literally have that open channel communication with your team. As a worker in the past, I always look at my leaders, okay, my supervisor, tell me what to do. Well, I'm really going through this. You should know, so you guide. So sometimes as a worker, as a colleague, we expect our supervisor to understand. So they mind read. So your way then is to proactively ask questions. How can I help? And you check in with them. Oh, how are you today? How's the work today? Any challenges that I can come in to help? So again, literally what I mentioned earlier, what Sudhi mentioned, open that channel communication. Be accessible to your colleagues, to your team. So by doing that, it helps to normalize the new normal. Hope that helps. So this question on my dad had a major stroke in early part this year. What can I do for respect given these current circumstances? Very good question. It's something again we're going to address the next webinar. Definitely for the time being, it's very difficult when there's no respite being there and being the main caregiver. And again, you're not alone in this. Many caregivers are going through same stress. What I can suggest for time being, do call up. There are a lot of national hotlines that are available where you can talk to get that emotional support. And in those national help hotlines, I'm quite certain there'll be some form of support that can be given for respite. So if you don't have it, we can send the hotline number to you, so you can call it to get more support. All right. And it's really 1:26. Time for one last question. Any short question to ask? You know, we can. Sorry.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions that we have for today, and it's really about the, I think we have already gone 2 minutes over the 55-minute webinar. Yeah, so I hope that both Joaquin and myself, we have given you at least sufficient information for you to come to an understanding about how we're going to adjust to this new normal. Is definitely a very stressful time. We are also taking time to try to adjust to this new normal for ourselves too. So yeah, really do have, be gentle on yourselves, on ourselves too. This is a very good reminder for us too, and I hope you had a really good afternoon. So, we look forward to seeing you again more of over the next series of webinars that we are probably promises going to prepare for you as well. All right, so if not, then thank you and have a really lovely afternoon today. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. See you at the next webinar.